In this video, I'm going to tell you about a project that is doing really exciting things in the DeFi space and is actually going after AAVE and Uniswap simultaneously to try and capture some of their market dominance. Hey guys, I'm Alessandro. Remember, nothing that I say is financial advice. I'm not a financial advisor. It's all for education and entertainment purposes only, and it is not intended for a UK audience. So the project we're talking about today is called 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏. Now, what is 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏? 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏 is a borrowing and lending platform, but it's also a DEX, right? And borrowing and lending platforms are the backbone. Well, borrowing, lending platforms and DEXs are obviously the backbone of DeFi, right? You can't do anything in DeFi without these protocols. But fundamentally, there's nothing like exciting or new about them generally. I guess you could argue that Uniswap have been quite innovative in the last few years with their Uniswap v2 and then v3 and then v4 pools. And if you don't know what they were, well, Uniswap is a DEX built on Ethereum as well. And fundamentally, these new iterations, v2, v3, v4, were just better ways of making capital more efficient. And that is essentially what 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏 is, right? 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏 is a protocol that is doing their absolute best to make capital more efficient across the platform. 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏 is a EVM compatible protocol, it exists currently on Ethereum mainnet, Arbitrum, Base, and Polygon. They have got plans to expand as well. I'm going to go into some of that as we go through. They have got even a partnership we're going to go through in a minute with Jupiter, which is pretty cool. So they are also expanding to Solana, but fundamentally they are a borrowing, lending / DEX that are working to make capital more efficient. And I'm going to go through some stats as to why I think they stand out somewhat against, borrowing, lending relative to AAVE, and then just like an Ethereum-based DEX or an EVM-based DEX. Obviously, then you'd comp them to Uniswap in that case. So we're going to look at both those tokens and fundamentally why I think 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏 here is a good opportunity, I think, because the metrics do, and the metrics and their sort of innovation does create a space for them to, I think, capture more of the market overall, so more market share overall. So let's go into here. So fundamentally, I always like to, before I'm looking at protocols, I always like to look at where was their raise, how much did they raise, who was the raise from, because I think those things are really, really important. And these guys have been around for a very long time, right? So there used to be a protocol called InstaDApp. And what did InstaDApp want to be? InstaDApp wanted to be the sort of like core infrastructure that DeFi was built upon. So they could go and access, it was like a ground layer or like a layer zero almost, and they could go and be plugged into multiple different DeFi applications. They've recently rebranded to 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏, and obviously they've got their DEX, they've got their lending platform, again we're going to go through this in a minute, but they still want to be that sort of like core DeFi hub. When they did their first raise, they raised pretty substantial names, Andre Cronje, Naval Ravnikant, Coinbase Ventures, so pretty Pantera as well, so really quite strong VC backers. So these guys have been around since 2018, the team's been building since then. They've been really they've been in this space for a very long time, creating products, right? So people that have been in crypto for a long time is always a good thing to see because they really know what's going on. Good backers, again, always a nice thing to see because it means that they've been able to go to people who know crypto very, very well and then raise from those people. And fundamentally, they're still innovating even now, right? They're still trying to create these new ways, again, in this instance, to make capital more efficient. So I'm just going to go through some of their fundamentals right now. So they're currently trading at a like $128 million market cap, FDV of like 450 or so. Again, we're going to go comp those properly in a minute. But if we come right down to here, look, I know there's a bunch of stuff here. Token Terminal, actually, if you want to be doing some research, is a great place to go and check out some research. But fundamentally, what I was wanting to show you here is this, right? 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏 has grown in DEX market share on Ethereum from 3% to 20% in the last year. So these are just percentage DEX volumes for given pools, right? Some of these pools are on Uniswap, 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏, cacao protocol. And Fluid has grown in that, like, against all these other Ethereum-based pools to capture 20% of the market. I mean, that is pretty strong, going from 3% to 20%. And I think this is the thing that sort of like underpins most of this thesis around Fluid, is that yes, they're being innovative. Yes, they're trying to make capital more efficient, but fundamentally, they're on a strong growth trajectory. And if they can continue to capture a decent chunk of this, if they can continue to capture a decent chunk of users, obviously TVL and volumes in their platforms, then the protocol itself is going to grow, and generally that is like bullish for token price overall generally. So growing from 3% market share to 20% across the last year, very, very strong. They were one of the first protocols to surpass 40 billion, this is on their DEX, right? $40 billion in cumulative volume in 199 days. So very, very fast rate of trajectory to getting to these numbers on their DEX. So Sushi Shop was faster, yes, but under 200 days is kind of like unseen generally in terms of like trying to surpass $40 billion as a DEX on Ethereum in terms of volume. Now, it is worth considering that, like, as time goes on, new protocols that come out, you would expect actually to reach these numbers earlier because there's more participants in crypto, money's worth less, blah, blah, blah. So you can take this with a pinch of salt, but fundamentally, like, they're growing at a strong, very fast rate. The other thing to consider is that in terms of its Fluid surpassed 10 billion in cumulative volume on Ethereum in their first 100 days. So, you know, the rate of which they're growing is very, very fast. This is also like a metric to suggest they're growing at this like strong rate. Since its launch, FluidDEX is leading stablecoin trading on Arbitrum, right? So like it only launched on Arbitrum maybe 6 or 9 months ago. And since then, it's captured the majority of stablecoin trading on the platform. Now, one more thing I think is really interesting, another little stat to throw at you, is that they are now dominating in specific pools, right? So you've got this like wrapped Bitcoin, Coinbase Bitcoin trading volume, and Fluid are taking up 50% of the sort of like wrapped Bitcoin on Ethereum now in terms of their volume, right? What does this tell you? Okay, so what this tells you is like for stablecoins, for Bitcoin, for these very large tokens that are like not degenerate in any way, Fluid is leading in terms of its capturing new growing market share. Now, why is that interesting? Well, if we just wind back a little bit and go, what's different about Fluid relative to these other protocols? Fluid, they coined this term like smart collateral and smart debt. What that means is if you want to take out a loan, if you want to go and deposit like a lending borrowing platform on Fluid, you deposit your funds as normal. This is the website. But if you want to borrow against those funds, the borrowing action, when you deposit your collateral into the protocol uses that collateral in LP positions. So let's say I take 1 ETH, right? And I go and deposit 1 ETH into a borrow lend platform. I've got 1 ETH in my borrow lend platform. I'm going to get paid the like funding fee. So if you don't know, the way lending protocols make money, people deposit into the protocol, then people borrow against the deposits, right? And it's in that borrowing against the deposits that the protocol makes a bit of money and the users make a bit of money. The rate is dynamic. It's just like when you deposit into a bank, you pay the bank interest. Exactly the same thing when you use DeFi, you deposit into the DeFi protocol, you pay the DeFi protocol interest, but that interest is kind of split between the DeFi protocol itself and the user who's deposited collateral. Generally, the vast majority is going to the user that deposited collateral, with a small sort of like fee going to the protocol itself. That's typically how those things work, and it works pretty well. When you deposit into a Fluid, the Fluid platform, you deposit your funds. If you borrow against them, when you deposit your collateral, that collateral is automatically used throughout the rest of the ecosystem, right? So you're not only paid by the borrower, you're paid because that collateral is used in different LP positions. So for example, let's say I go and deposit 1 ETH into Fluid. I borrow $1,000 against it. It costs me 10% APY to borrow that $1,000. However, my ETH that's sitting in that collateral position is now going to be used as smart collateral. And the way what that means is the deposit that I put there is going to be put into different LP positions, and I'm going to earn trading fees on those LP positions. Those trading fees are going to go back into my borrow debt, into the place that I put the money, or put the ETH. What that means is my actual real borrowing yield reduces, right? Because, as I said, I put 1 ETH in, I borrowed $1,000, I was paying 10% APY, but now my ETH that I deposited is being used in other DeFi applications, in other LP positions, and it's earning trading fees from people that are swapping between, let's say, ETH and USDC. So my ETH position is earning fees whilst it's sat in that collateralized debt position. There's a lot of things there, but fundamentally what it means is borrowing rates come down, and they can come down quite a lot actually. There's borrowing rates of, if you borrow rates are more like 6% as opposed to 8 or 9%. So if you've got large debt positions, this really does vastly reduce the amount you need to repay, right? And so this is real big innovation. Rather than just depositing funds into, let's say, AAVE, right? But AAVE is an amazing protocol, and the reason AAVE is so big, it's like the 52nd biggest bank, essentially, if you were to go by TVL in the US. Like if you were to take AAVE and put it and make it a bank, it would be like the 52nd biggest bank in the US. Now, AAVE is massive, right? And AAVE deserves to be massive because it has proven itself to be very, very, very safe. If we just sort of rewind a little bit, and I didn't know if you saw this week, there was this hack on Cetus protocol, which is the DEX on SUI. Like, smart contract risk is real. Funds get hacked in this space. That happens, right? It's not like shit goes wrong. And so the reason AAVE is so big, it has like $40 billion almost in TVL. Not net deposits, they're different things. And the reason it's so big is because it's been deemed to be so safe, right? So there's always smart contract risk, and as you've got these new, novel protocols that are sort of trying to capture TVL, they're going to always struggle to capture that real big whale TVL initially because they haven't vetted themselves as being really, really safe. Again, this is another thing that I really like about Fluid, right? It's been here since 2018. Their smart contracts have been audited ever since then, so got a lot of you need in these spaces to have the smart contracts really, really vetted, and these guys have had contracts out for a very long time, which again is a very good thing. So smart collateral, right? That's one thing that Fluid are doing, which no other borrow lend platform are doing. Now they've also got this DEX, right? And so if we go back and just have a look at their DEX, just 1 second. Fluid are also implementing a buyback mechanism once their annualized revenue gets to over $10 million. So you can see they're 5.5 mil or 5.3 mil now. So they're very much on their way to getting to this sort of $10 million threshold when they're going to start to use the revenue that they make on the platform to go and buy back the token. Now, if they stay where they are now, i.e. don't grow, it's not going to make much difference, really. I mean, it make a little bit of difference, but fundamentally, my sort of idea behind Fluid is I think they're going to continue to capture market share. And the reason I don't think they're going to continue to capture market share is because as the protocols prove to be, the contracts are safe and all that sort of thing, it doesn't really make sense for you to go and deposit collateral if you're any player somewhere that it's not earning yield. Why would you not go and deposit your collateral into a place that's earning yield? Doesn't make any sense. Not only that, they also have this refinance tab here, which means that if you've got like a, I don't know if you've ever looped collateral. It's a good chance that you haven't. What looping collateral is let's say I put some ETH in a borrow lend platform, and then I borrow, let's say, dollars against it. I can go and then use those dollars to buy more ETH, and then I can put the ETH back into the platform. And so I can lever up my position in ETH terms by looping. Now, if you loop quite hard, it's very annoying to unloop, especially as the position unwinds. It can basically take you into like liquidation thresholds, right? So what these guys have done is they've just sort of gone, right, if you've got any position, whether it's like heavily looped, not looped, you can just go and refinance it and deposit it in this place on their platform super simply, right? So you just like, they do all the sort of like back end of the unlooping and then the relooping back on this platform, and they'll be matched one-to-one. Obviously there'll be some fees in there, but fundamentally they're matched one-to-one. So that's a very, very useful tool, right? You've got this smart debt, reducing borrowing costs. Then you've also got this situation where you can just go and refinance any positions that you've got and go and deposit them straight into the platform super, super simply. Again, really, really just like makes it easy for the end user, which is exactly what you want. And you've also got this situation where they're going to be buying back the token as soon as they're making $10 million in revenue. And there's this recent integration to Jupiter, right? So yesterday, Jupiter announced a partnership with Fluid. Jupiter are doing ridiculous things in DeFi generally. If you don't know, Jupiter currently are accounting for about 20 to 40% of all the DEX volume on Solana is aggregated through Jupiter. Jupiter obviously have all these like extra little sort of like arms as well. They acquired Moonshot a few months ago. Moonshot are like an app where you can use cash or like Apple Pay to buy memes and stuff. A bunch of people did that with Trump. But Jupiter really are like trying to be the DeFi kind of like single app where you don't really need anything else. Just everything can be done through Jupiter. Perps through Jupiter. Aggregating through Jupiter. Now borrowing, lending, again, can be done on Jupiter, right? This is going to come out, as they say, sort of early 2025. But fundamentally, Fluid are providing the back-end infrastructure for this. I mean, that's pretty amazing when you consider Jupiter have such enormous outreach, right? They are bringing Fluid are bringing the infrastructure. Not an easy task, mind, taking your infrastructure and then making it into a Solana compatible. But they've managed to do that, which is, again, like, hats off to the devs. But they are fundamentally, the partnership is Fluid and Jupiter, and they're splitting revenue 50-50. So Jupiter have the distribution, right? Users use Jupiter. Solana is the place to go and trade anything, right? Solana just generally has been absolutely dominating crypto generally over the last 6-12 months. If you look at total fees generated, app revenue, all that sort of stuff, Solana's been killing it. Now Jupiter have got the distribution of Solana, partnering with Fluid. I think this is actually a really, really strong partnership for Fluid because you've got immediate distribution of the product to Solana users. Now they'll be battling with Camino in terms of their trying to capture TVL from Camino, but fundamentally, again, they're going to be using their same sort of like novel design of making debt smarter. So my bet is actually they do capture a decent chunk of the market on Solana, specifically because of the smart collateral debt, but probably more than anything because Jupiter have such good distribution over on Solana. Now, there's one thing we need to go through. There was some pretty bad FUD on Fluid recently. Now, if we just, from a bird's eye view, I like FUD, right? Because it tests a protocol for what it is, and then you can buy things much cheaper. So I always think FUD provides good opportunities, I always think. And so this particular FUD was, they had one LP position on their platform, an ETH USD pool. And this is again, so this is they're just like innovating in the open, right? On their V2 DEX, What it was is like an LP position that is, you deposit into this LP position, but these funds are held like a Uniswap V3 pool. They're held in a concentrated pattern, right? So let's say you're holding ETH and USDC. You could hold ETH and USDC across the whole range, or you can reduce that range to make the capital more efficient. Now, this was an auto rebalancing pool. The idea behind the pool was it would auto rebalance to keep about 50-50 ETH USDC in the pool. As it rebalanced, and as the price of ETH came from $4,000 down to like $1,600, overall, the LP position, people who provided liquidity on the platform, lost quite big. Now, this is actually what you would expect, right? And fundamentally, the ETH, they just didn't anticipate that ETH USD would be such a volatile pair at that point in the market, which, probably no one thought ETH was going to go close to all-time highs and then back to $1,600 when Bitcoin was still trading. Probably no one thought ETH was going to bleed so bad to Bitcoin, but it did. So this wasn't really this was a bad choice, right? And LP has lost money in this position. But from my perspective, the way I see about it is when you provide liquidity, you are actively taking risk on whatever the underlying collateral is. So if you provide concentrated liquidity, you're taking even more risk on whatever the underlying collateral is. This was a concentrated liquidity pool. People deposited in it and they got wrecked essentially. Now, because of the mechanisms of Fluid, they wanted to try and make the capital use more efficient, and it was sort of their idea to do this LP position that they were managing with rebalancing. Because people got wrecked, that they have decided to re-incentivize use of this pool. So they've gone away and thought about it and thought, okay, we're going to pay back some of these people that have lost a lot of money. I don't really think that's like perfectly required, but it does show that they are doing their best to like look after community members, which I kind of like, to be honest. I agree with this person here. Like, I'm not sure I get the criticism on Fluid really. They never offered some magical solution to offer risk-free returns to LPs on volatile pairs. Obviously, ETH-USD is a volatile pair. Among other things, essentially, when you LP in a tightened range, you're LPing on steroids, right? So you've got high risk, high return. The product is valuable if given a market view, right? So I do tend to agree with this take here. Now, that's again why, very luckily, I was able to bring Fluid to you guys when there's been a bit of FUD. Obviously, I think when there is things that go wrong, it does provide opportunity. Right, the risk reward obviously gets more to the risk side, but the reward goes up as well. And I think Fluid is one of those tokens that, based upon all the things that we've been through a minute ago, especially with the recent Jupiter partnership and with the mainly with the Jupiter partnership really, and with their sort of growth on Arbitrum and ETH capturing more and more of that sort of DEX volume market share, I really do think they have a strong chance to continue to grow from here. Again, whether they do or not, TBC, but they are capturing decent chunks of the market, and I think they're a very interesting play in the sort of DeFi space. So that covers Fluid. Now I'm going to give you just going to go on to Lighter real quick. I don't know if you guys saw my last video 2 weeks ago on Lighter, but if you did, got a little bit of alpha for you on how best to farm or how best to accrue points on the platform. You are better off, if you want to max out how many points you try and get, trading tokens that are lower in liquidity. So things that have less open interest for a start. So open interest is down here. Things that have less open interest, things that have lower volume. Low volume and open interest do tend to basically track one-to-one, so they're sort of the same thing. And you are far better off holding a higher P&L. So someone did some research and they basically found that trades that were closed in a profit got about 20 to 30% more points. Trades that were on lower market cap coins, or trades that were on sort of less liquid coins, got better points as well. And not only, of course, right, if you look at some of these tokens, like Floki, you can do 3x leverage on, whereas Bitcoin you can do 50x leverage on. Now this is actually on a per collateral basis, not dollar of volume basis, right? So like, let's say I've got $1,000, I take a 3x levered long on Floki, that's $3,000. If I've got $1,000 and I take a 50x levered position on Bitcoin, that's a 50k position, right? Those two are really, really vastly different in terms of the amount of volume that I've done. But I think in terms of the amount of points that you can get, the Floki trade seems like the one that is actually going to accrue more points. So Lighter are really, really trying to like punish wash trading, punish high frequency traders, and punish people who are just opening and closing positions with absolutely no care for how good, like how well thought out the trades are. So there's something called a Sharpe ratio, which is like how good, how on a risk adjusted level, like how good a trader a given account is, and accounts with better Sharpe ratios are getting far better points per dollar ratio. So if you're farming Lighter, really would recommend using a trading strategy anyway, obviously, but high P&L, green P&L, much better on Lighter, plus using some of those lower liquidity coins rather than maxing out the leverage on like ETH and Bitcoin is probably sensible as well. Not least of which, if you use the lower liquidity coins that have less volume, then you could only take out like a $3,000 position as opposed to a $50,000 position. If you've got like $1,000 of collateral, that means if the price moves 1%, you're still okay. Whereas if you're on a 50x levered position and the price moves 1%, you're almost liquidated. So those are much more sensible, in my opinion. If you want some Lighter codes, I managed to get a few more. There should be some in the comments. Again, if they're all gone by the time you watch the video, just come back in a week when they refresh, and there's a good chance you'll get one then. Anyway, I just want to say thank you so much for watching. That was a long one today. If you got to the end of the video, I salute you. Please like, comment, subscribe, and yeah, because that gives me a good chance of coming back next time. I shall see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.